Scientists, there is a small plastic bottle sitting in a medicine cabinet somewhere near you tonight, and there is a very good chance you already know exactly what it looks like. White cap, amber body, a picture of a moon or a star or a person sleeping peacefully on a cloud, and somewhere on that label a number, 5 milligrams, 10 milligrams, sometimes 12. It is one of the most widely used sleep aids in the United States. Millions of adults reach for it, a great many of them every single night, and plenty of parents have given it to a child. And yet, if you go looking for what people actually say about it, you find something strange. You do not find people saying it works beautifully. You find people asking a question: why is every dose so high? That question gets asked over and over, in different words, by people who are not scientists and are not trying to be. They are just people standing in a drugstore aisle at 9 o'clock at night holding 2 bottles, wondering why the smallest one they can find still says 5 milligrams. I want you to hold on to that question because it is a better question than the person asking it realizes. Here's what I mean. Your body already makes this substance. It has made it every single night of your life. And the amount your body releases into your bloodstream on a normal, ordinary, unremarkable night is not measured in milligrams at all. It is measured in units so small that most people have never heard of them. So we have a hormone that your own body produces in almost invisible quantities, being sold on a shelf in slabs. A gap that wide is worth a question, because it means the amount on the shelf was not chosen to match anything your body does. And when you follow it all the way down, you find something that changes how the whole bottle looks. It turns out that almost everybody, including a great many people who take it faithfully every night, has misunderstood what this substance is actually for. Not whether it works, what it is for. Those are 2 very different questions, and the second one is the one we are going to answer. Let us start where it starts, which is in the middle of your head. Right in the center of your brain, tucked between the 2 halves where they meet, sits a gland about the size of a grain of rice. It is called the pineal gland. For most of human history, nobody had the faintest idea what it did. It sat there in the anatomy textbooks, drawn neatly, labeled confidently, and explained by nobody. We know now. That little gland has one main job, and it does that job in the dark. When light stops reaching your eyes, a signal travels from the back of your eye, through a relay station in your brain, and down to that gland, and the gland begins to release a substance into your bloodstream. The National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health, which is part of the National Institutes of Health, describes it in about the plainest language you will ever see from a government agency. Melatonin, they say, is a hormone that your brain produces in response to darkness. It helps with the timing of your circadian rhythms, your 24-hour internal clock, and being exposed to light at night can block melatonin production. Now notice what is not in that sentence. There is no mention of sedation, nothing about knocking you out, no mention anywhere of force. It says timing. Now, I know what a certain kind of person is thinking right now because I would be thinking it too. Timing, sedation, what is the difference if I am asleep either way? The difference turns out to be the whole story. And I am going to hold that thread for a few minutes because before it makes sense, you need to see what this substance is actually doing on a normal night when nobody is taking anything at all. So picture an evening, a real one. Yours, maybe last Tuesday, the sun goes down. Not suddenly, the way it does when you flip a switch, but gradually, the way it actually does. And somewhere in that gradual fading, before you feel remotely sleepy, before you have even thought about bed, that little gland starts releasing melatonin into your blood. Sleep researchers have a name for that moment. They call it dim light melatonin onset. It is, as far as we can measure it, the most reliable marker we have of where a person's internal clock actually sits. Not where they say it sits, where it is. And here's the part that surprises people. That release does not make you fall asleep. It happens, typically, a couple of hours before you go to bed. You are still up, washing dishes maybe, watching something, talking to somebody in the next room. The melatonin is already in your blood and you are wide awake. So what is it doing? It is telling. That is genuinely the best word for it. There is a cluster of cells sitting just above where your optic nerves cross, called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is a mouthful, so most people simply call it the master clock. Nearly every organ you have runs on its own daily rhythm, and that cluster is the main thing helping to keep them coordinated with one another. Melatonin is one of the signals that reaches it. In the scientific literature, you will see it described again and again in the same terms. A time cue, a signal of darkness, not a sedative, a message. And the message is one word long: night. Once you see it that way, some things about your own life start making a great deal more sense. It explains why a bright screen an hour before bed genuinely matters and is not just something people say. Light at your eyes suppresses the signal. Your gland is trying to send the word night, and the light is holding the word back. It explains why flying across an ocean scrambles you so thoroughly. Your clock is still running on the hour it left. Every organ in you is convinced it is 3 in the morning while the people around you are ordering lunch, and it explains something that many people notice after 60 and quietly assume is just them. The signal tends to get smaller with age, its peak flattens out, and the message still gets sent, night after night. It is simply not shouted the way it once was. So far, so reasonable. Your body makes a nightly announcement. As the years go by, the announcement gets quieter. Somebody figured out how to put that announcement in a bottle. You would think that would be the end of a very happy story. It is not, and the reason it is not sits in a number that has been sitting in the published literature for over a decade. In plain sight, where anybody could have looked at it. In 2013, a team led by Eduardo Ferraccioli Oda, working at Yale, pulled together the randomized controlled trials on melatonin for primary sleep disorders and ran the numbers together, which is what you do when individual studies are small and you want to know what they say as a group. Their analysis was published in the journal PLOS 1. They found a real effect. I want to be careful here, because this is exactly where people start hearing things that were not said. Melatonin did significantly reduce the time it took people to fall asleep, and it did significantly increase total sleep time, and it did improve sleep quality, all compared to placebo, all to a statistically significant degree. That is a genuine finding. It is not nothing. Here is the size of it. The reduction in the time it took to fall asleep was about 7 minutes. 7 minutes. And in the same analysis, the authors did something admirably honest. They put that number next to the numbers for prescription sleep medications, so you could see the two side by side. The older prescription sedatives came in between 10 and roughly 20 minutes. The newer ones came in between about 13 and 17. So the substance that half the country reaches for is measurably weaker at the one job everybody assumes is its job. Now, if melatonin were a sleeping pill, that result would be damning. A sleeping pill that saves you 7 minutes is a poor sleeping pill. But that is only damning if you have decided in advance what it is. And this is the place where almost everybody makes the same wrong turn, and it is such a natural wrong turn that I want to defend the people who make it. You have a lifetime of training with a particular kind of substance. If a headache does not lift with 1 tablet, you take 2. If a cup of coffee does not do it, you pour another. More gives you more. That is how the medicine cabinet works, and it works that way often enough that it stops feeling like a theory and starts feeling like common sense. So a person takes 3 milligrams, not much happens. They go to 5, then 10. Somewhere in there, they may find a bottle at 12 and they think, finally, a serious dose. They are applying a rule that has served them well their entire life. The trouble is that the rule belongs to a category this substance does not belong to. Think for a moment about the difference between a lever and a message. If you want a heavy door to open further, you push the lever harder. The door responds to force, and more force gets you more door. But if you are trying to tell somebody the time, shouting does not make it later. That is the distinction. And for a long while, that was mostly a nice way of putting it, an argument by analogy, which is a polite way of saying it was not evidence. Then somebody went and tested it properly, in people about the age of most of you watching this. The study was published in 2001 in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism, led by a researcher named Irina Jdanova, working out of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And the reason I have been holding it until now is that it does not merely support the idea, it shows you the mechanism in one clean result, and once you have seen it, you cannot unsee it. They recruited 30 people, all over the age of 50. Half of them slept normally. Half had measurably reduced sleep efficiency, meaning they were spending time in bed not sleeping, which is a very particular kind of misery that a lot of you will recognize. It was double-blind and placebo-controlled, which means neither the subjects nor the people handing out the capsules knew what was in them. Every person received 4 different treatments in random order, a placebo and 3 doses of melatonin, 1/10 of a milligram, 3/10 of a milligram, and 3 milligrams. Each was taken 30 minutes before bed, every night for a week, with a week of washout in between so nothing carried over. And the sleep was not measured by asking people how they felt. It was measured in a laboratory with electrodes on the last 3 nights of every single treatment week. That is about as careful as this kind of work gets. Here's what came back. The dose of 0.3 of a milligram restored sleep efficiency in the poor sleepers. The statistics on it were strong, and it did something else at the same time. It lifted their blood melatonin back up into the normal nighttime range, not above it, into it. That dose was doing something very specific. The small dose was not overriding the body. Rather, it was replacing a signal that had gotten faint, at roughly the volume the body itself used to send it. Then there is the 3 milligram dose, 10 times as much. And here's where you have to listen closely, because this is the exact spot where this story usually gets told wrong, including by people who mean well. The 3 milligram dose also improved sleep. It did. It is right there in the results. Anybody who tells you the big dose does nothing is overstating the case, and I am not going to do that to you. What the big dose did not do was work better. 10 times the amount, not 10 times the benefit. Not obviously any additional benefit at all, over a dose 1/10 its size. And it brought along two things the smaller dose did not. It dropped the subject's body temperature, and it left melatonin still elevated in their blood into the daylight hours. That second finding is the answer to the question we started with. Melatonin is the word for night. That is its entire function. A large dose does not deliver that word more forcefully. It delivers it for longer than the night lasts. The signal is still being broadcast when the sun is up. Your body is receiving the word night at 8 in the morning over breakfast in the car. That is not a stronger sleeping pill. What you are looking at is a clock being told the wrong hour. Now, there is a complaint you hear constantly from people who take large doses. Not that they do not sleep, that they wake up feeling like they are wading through something. Foggy, heavy, slow to arrive. It is tempting to join those two things together and declare that one causes the other. I am not going to do that because this study did not test it. What the trial measured is narrower, and I would rather give you the narrow true thing than the wide, satisfying one. It measured that the melatonin was still circulating when the sun came up. Whether that is what people are feeling over breakfast is a fair question, and an interesting one, and it is not a question this trial answered. I want to be very clear about something before we go one step further. That 0.3 of a milligram figure is a measurement from a research study. It is not a recommendation, and I am not giving you one. And let me close a door before anybody walks through it. Please do not take that number as an instruction to go hunting for a tiny dose on your own. There is no product on an American shelf that reliably delivers that amount, and the do-it-yourself fixes are the worst part of the whole business. Cutting a tablet into quarters, crushing one up, guessing with a dropper. In a few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly why that approach fails. And when I do, I think you will want that door to have stayed shut. What you take, whether you take anything at all, and how it fits with every other medication in your cabinet, is a conversation for you and your doctor and nobody else. The Mayo Clinic lists interactions with more prescriptions than most people realize, including medications for blood clotting, for seizures, for diabetes, and some medications for blood pressure. I am here to explain a mechanism. Your physician is there to know you. Now, if everything I have just said is true, you would expect it to show up somewhere outside the research journals. Ideas this basic usually leave fingerprints in the real world. They do. And the place they show up is the last place most people would think to look, which is in regulatory paperwork. In the United States, melatonin is sold as a dietary supplement, which is why it is on an open shelf next to the vitamins. Cross the Atlantic, and it is a different thing entirely. In Britain, melatonin is a prescription medicine, and prescription medicines have to state, in writing, precisely what they are licensed to treat. A regulator reviews the evidence and then draws a line, and the company may not step over it. So here's the interesting question. When a regulator sat down with the evidence on melatonin and had to write, in a legal document, what this substance is actually for, what did they write? There is a licensed melatonin oral solution on the British market. Its licensed indication is the short-term treatment of jet lag in adults. Jet lag, not insomnia. Nothing about sleeplessness in general, and nothing about trouble dropping off. Jet lag, which is the precise condition of having an internal clock that is pointing at the wrong hour. The regulator, looking at the same evidence we have been walking through, licensed it as a clock adjuster. And there is a second half to this, which is how the whole thing became public. The pharmaceutical industry in Britain is policed by a body called the Prescription Medicines Code of Practice Authority, and it has an unusual power. When a company crosses a line badly enough, that body can require the company to be named in advertisements placed in medical journals. Not a quiet fine, a notice in the journals doctors read. Colonis Pharma was named that way. The advertisements ran in September of 2020 in the British Medical Journal and elsewhere, and they covered two rulings about promotional letters the company had sent regarding its melatonin oral solution. In the first, the company was found to have promoted the medicine for a use outside its license, and the panel found it had put patient safety at risk. In the second, it had sent out incorrect prescribing information. The company was publicly reprimanded on top of that. There was also a separate ruling the year before, on the same product, where claims in a letter had been propped up with a reference that did not actually support them, and with the company's own unpublished data cited as though it were independent authority. I am not telling you this to make anyone the villain of the evening. Companies get things wrong, and the interesting part is not the scolding. The interesting part is what the line was. That line, the one the company stepped over, was drawn around timing. Its license said this is for a clock problem. Push it past that, toward being a general answer for people who cannot sleep, and you are outside what the evidence supports, and a panel of people who read the evidence for a living will say so in writing. The paperwork and the laboratory agree with each other, and they always have, which brings us back to that bottle in the medicine cabinet, and to one more problem with it, a practical one. In 2017, 2 researchers at the University of Guelph did something almost nobody thinks to do. They bought melatonin supplements off the shelf, 31 of them, across different brands and different forms, and they measured what was actually inside. The results were not close. The melatonin content ranged from 83% below what the label claimed all the way to 478% above it. More than 71% of the products missed their own label by more than a 10% margin. And it got stranger. When they compared different production, lots of the same product, the same brand, the same box, the amount varied by as much as 465% between batches. They also found something nobody was looking for. In 8 of the supplements, about a quarter of them, they detected serotonin, a closely related compound that is used in the treatment of several neurological conditions and has no business being in a sleep supplement at all. In amounts ranging from 1 to 75 micrograms. Nobody had put that on a label either. Now put that finding next to everything we have covered. If this substance were a lever, sloppy dosing would be an annoyance. You would get a bit more effect, or a bit less. But a lever is not what we are dealing with. We are dealing with a message, and its accuracy is the entire point. A person carefully working out what agrees with them is trying to tune a signal, using a bottle whose actual contents may bear only a passing relationship to the number printed on the front, and which may not even match the last bottle of the identical product. That is not tuning. Call it what it actually is, which is guessing with confidence. There is one more consequence of treating a signal like a sedative, and it is worth a moment because it involves people who cannot advocate for themselves. Between 2012 and 2021, poison control centers in the United States logged a 530% rise in reports of children swallowing melatonin. The total across that decade came to more than 260,000. Most of that was small children getting into a bottle on their own. I want to be careful about how that number is used in both directions. Nothing in it makes melatonin a poison, nor is the figure nothing, and I am not going to wave it away. How much trouble an ingestion causes depends on the dose, the product, the child's age, and whatever else was swallowed with it, and some of those cases needed medical assessment. If a child in your house ever swallows some, do not sit and watch to see what happens, and do not go looking for an answer on the internet. Call poison control straight away, and if the child is unwell, call emergency services. That is what those numbers exist for. And if there is melatonin in your home, with grandchildren in and out of it, it belongs up high with the medicines, not in the kitchen drawer with the sweets. What the number really shows is a category error working itself out in real houses. The stuff moved in as if it were candy, because everybody had decided it was a mild sleeping aid, which was never what it was. So let me draw the line all the way through, and let me be as fair to melatonin as the evidence requires. Because there is an overclaim in both directions, and I have no interest in trading one for the other. Melatonin is not a fraud. It works. It works precisely at the thing it is built for, which is telling your body what hour it is. For a clock that has genuinely drifted, from travel, from an unusual schedule, from a body whose own nightly signal has gone quiet, that is a real and useful tool. What it is not is a sedative. It does not push you under. It never did, and that distinction is not my opinion. In 2017, the American Academy of Sleep Medicine published its clinical practice guideline on treating chronic insomnia in adults, and it put the matter about as directly as a professional body ever puts anything. Their recommendation was that clinicians not use melatonin as a treatment for sleep onset or sleep maintenance insomnia in adults. Read carefully, that is not a verdict that melatonin is useless. What they are delivering is a verdict about a category. They are saying it does not belong in the insomnia drawer. A sleep researcher at Columbia University named Marie-Pierre Saint-Onge put the same idea in one sentence in 2026, talking to Discover magazine, and I have not found a better summary of the whole matter anywhere. Melatonin, she said, is not indicated for insomnia. It is indicated for difficulties with circadian rhythms in people who have trouble adjusting their sleep cycles to daylight social norms. That is it. That is the sentence that ought to be printed on the bottle. So think about what has actually been happening in all those medicine cabinets. Millions of people, many of them lying awake at 2 in the morning with a mind that will not go quiet, have been reaching for a substance whose real job is to tell the body what time it is. And when the small dose did not do what they hoped, they did the sensible thing, the thing a lifetime of medicine had taught them, and they reached for more. They were not being foolish. They were applying a good rule to the wrong category. The dose went up, the message got longer, and the signal that was meant to say night began saying it into the morning. If there is one thing worth carrying out of this, it is not a number and it is not a brand. What you can take with you is a question to ask about the thing in your hand. Is this a lever or is this a message? Because if it were a lever, more would at least be a sensible thing to wonder about. And if it is a message, then more is not louder, more is just longer. And longer, for something whose whole meaning is when, is not a stronger version of the thing. It is a different message entirely. Now, none of this tells you what you should do tonight, and I want to be honest that it was never going to. What keeps a particular person awake at 3 in the morning is a question about that person, and it might be their clock, and it might be a dozen other things, several of which are worth a proper look. That is exactly the conversation to have with your doctor, especially if you are taking anything else at all, and especially if you have been taking this every night for a long time without ever really deciding to. Bring the bottle with you. Show them the number on it. That is a better use of 10 minutes than any amount of reading. Thank you for giving me your time tonight. If you found this useful, the kindest thing you can do is leave a comment telling me what you had always assumed melatonin was doing, because I read them, and they genuinely shape what I look into next. Sleep well, and take care of yourself.